It's a Tuesday night and you can't sleep. You're doing the math again, on your phone, in the dark. $1,000 a month. Every month. For 30 years. At 7%. About $1 million by the time you retire. You stare at the number. $1 million. You were taught your whole life that this was the goal. The finish line. The word your parents whispered when they talked about being set for life. And then you open your phone, and somebody your age is standing in front of a house that costs $8 million, smiling. So you go looking, and you find 100 videos explaining what every level of wealth feels like. What a millionaire's day looks like. What changes at 10 million? Where the private jet shows up. Every one of them tells you the same story. And not one of them shows you the receipt. None of them mention that a private jet costs between $500,000 and $1 million a year just to keep in the air before you've bought the aircraft. And that $1 million a year of spending, permanently, requires $25 million of capital doing nothing else. Ever. None of them mention that the top 1% does not start at $5 million. It starts at $13,666,000. So this is the version with the receipts. 7 levels. And at every single one, 3 things. What you think that number buys. What it actually buys, with the real price attached. And what it takes from you that nobody puts a number on. Some of these are going to be far lower than you expect. And one of them is so much higher that the entire ladder rearranges itself. Because $1 million isn't the finish line. $1 million is level 1. And level 1 isn't where you think it is either. Level 1. $1 million does not put you in the top 10% of American households. The top 10% starts at $1,920,000. $1 million puts you somewhere around the top 15%. Comfortable. Uncommon. Not rare. And the median American household, the exact middle, the family standing at the 50-yard line of the entire country, has a net worth of $192,000. So 1 million is about 5 times the middle of the country. Sit with that number for a second, because it's the most honest number in this entire video. 5 times the middle. Not 50. Not 500. 5. Now here's what it actually buys. Go back to that Tuesday night. You're 56 now, and you made it. You actually hit the number. And the million is not sitting in an account with a comma you can look at. It's spread across a 401k you can't touch without penalty for another 3 years. Equity in a house you still live in and still owe on, and a brokerage account you check too often. You still grocery shop at the same store. You still drive the car you bought used 4 years ago. You still feel a small flinch when the check comes at a restaurant and somebody suggests splitting it evenly and you had the cheaper thing. Because here's the arithmetic nobody puts in the thumbnail. $1 million, invested, safely, generates about $40,000 a year that you can spend without eating the principal. $40,000. That's a starting salary. That is what a lifetime of correct decisions produces as an income. And that's the trick of level 1. The million didn't change your life. It changed your sleep. You now know, quietly, privately, in a way you cannot explain to anyone at work, that you are going to be okay. Not rich. Okay. And okay turns out to be what you were actually chasing the entire time. You just assumed it would arrive feeling like something else. Something louder. The verb at 1 million is breathe. Remember that word. Because it is the only verb on this entire ladder that anybody actually wants, and it shows up first, and almost everything after this is people who got here and didn't know how to stop. Now before we go on, everything I get wrong first ends up written down. That's the book, first link below. This is the short version. I won't mention it again. Level 2. $5 million. You will be told, over and over, everywhere, that $5 million puts you in the top 1%. That is wrong. And I want to be specific about how wrong, because the size of the gap is the whole story. The top 5% of American households starts at $3,780,000. So 5 million clears that. You're roughly top 4%. Genuinely uncommon. But the top 1% doesn't start at 5 million. It starts at 13,666,000. 5 million isn't the 1%. It's not close to the 1%. It's 36% of the way there. And I think that error is worth stopping on, because it's the exact error the entire internet makes about money. And it's the reason this level is the most psychologically dangerous rung on the ladder. At 5 million, you have crossed into a room where everyone assumes you've arrived. Your friends think you've arrived. Your family thinks you've arrived. Somebody at a wedding asks what you do and then does not ask a second question because they've decided they know. Here's what it actually buys. $200,000 a year, spendable, sustainably, forever, without touching the principal. That is a very good doctor's income that arrives whether you get out of bed or not. You walk into a dealership and you're not there to negotiate, you're there to choose. You book business class without pricing economy first. You have an accountant who has opinions about your last accountant. You have a lawyer on retainer, which is a phrase you never expected to apply to you. What you do not have: a jet, a yacht, a staff, a second passport situation. Any of the imagery that this number carries in your head. And you know it. That's the problem. Because you now spend time in rooms with people at 20 million and 50 million. You see how they move. You watch someone decide something in 4 seconds that you would need a weekend to decide. And you understand that 5 million is not the top of anything. It's the entry fee. It's the price of admission to a room where you're the poorest person in it. Every room above this one contains someone who looks at you the exact way you used to look at people with $1 million. The verb at 5 million is compare. And the comparing is the trap. Because the comparing is the entire engine that pulls people to level 3. Nobody climbs from 5 to 14 because they need more. They climb because they met somebody at 14. Level 3, $13,700,000. This is the real 1%. This is the actual line, not 5 million. This, and I want to point out how strange that is. The 1%, the number that shows up in every political argument, in every headline, in every angry comment section, it is not a yacht number. It is not a jet number. It's a paid-off house, a very serious portfolio, and roughly $550,000 a year of spending you never have to earn again. $500,000 a year, forever, without working. That is what the top 1% of the wealthiest large country on earth actually looks like from the inside. It looks like a nice house in a good neighborhood and a car that does not turn heads. Here's what changes, and it's the first change on this ladder that is genuinely enormous. You stop working because you have to. You start working because you want to. That sentence sounds soft. It is not soft. It's the largest single change on the entire ladder, and every level above it is a variation on a theme that starts here. You wake up on a Tuesday, and you do not have to go anywhere. You probably still will, because the habit is 20 years deep and your whole idea of who you are is built on it. But the obligation is gone. And once the obligation is gone, the work changes shape. You stop taking meetings that bore you. You stop saying yes out of fear. You stop answering email on Sunday night. And your friends still on salaries cannot do this. They're watching a clock. They're managing a boss. They're performing a version of themselves that keeps the money coming. You used to do that too. You don't anymore. Nobody talks about the distance that opens up. Everybody feels it. You buy a second home, not to flip, to use. You go 4 times a year, and every single time you're there you think about selling it, and every time you don't. Because selling it would be a statement, and you don't want to make a statement. Your kids notice that their friends' parents don't live like this. They ask questions you can't answer well. You tell them to be grateful. You're not confident they understand. You're not entirely confident you do. The verb at 13 million is choose. And here's the thing about level 3 that nobody says out loud. This is the top of the useful ladder. Everything above this point buys logistics. It does not buy freedom, because you already bought freedom here. Hold on to that, because we're about to spend 15 minutes watching people pay enormous amounts of money for things that are worse. Level 4, $50 million. And this is where I need you to stay with me, because this is the level everybody gets wrong, and the correction rearranges everything above it. Here's the version you've been sold. At 50 million you have people, an assistant, a house manager, a driver, a chef, a financial team, plural, and you fly private. Let me show you the receipt. And estate manager running one property, $185,000 a year at the median, up to $338,000. Running multiple properties, $280,000 median, up to $520. A resident private chef, $150,000 median. Traveling with you, $200,000, up to $400. A personal assistant at this level, $150,000. A formal butler, $150. An executive housekeeper, $115. A live-in nanny, $97.5. Add a modest version of that household, an estate manager, a chef, an assistant, a housekeeper, and you're at $600,000 a year in salaries. Before payroll taxes. before benefits, before housing them, which adds 20 to 45,000 a head, before anybody has bought a single grocery. 600,000 a year of permanent spending requires $15 million of capital assigned to that, and nothing else, forever. So at 50 million, a full staff is real. It's affordable. It costs you a third of your entire net worth's earning power to keep 4 people employed in your house. Now the jet. Operating a private jet costs between $500,000 and $1 million a year. That is fuel, crew, hangar, insurance, maintenance, inspections. That figure does not include buying the aircraft, which runs from about $2 million for a used light jet to over $150 million for a new long-range one. And ownership only starts making financial sense above roughly 350 flight hours a year. That's a business trip nearly every week, all year. $1 million a year of jet requires $25 million of capital doing nothing but keeping that jet in the air. So, $50 million. $25 million dedicated to the jet. $15 million dedicated to the staff. That's 40 of your $50 million spent on 2 line items. And you have not bought a house, paid a tax bill, educated a child, or eaten. So at 50 million, you do not own a jet. You charter one occasionally, for something that actually matters, and you feel slightly guilty about it on the way home. Which is why the real 50 million life looks like this. A very good house. 2 homes, maybe. An assistant. A housekeeper. Business class most of the time and first class sometimes. And a lot of meetings about taxes. And you don't have to take my word for it, because people who live at these numbers keep saying it out loud, and nobody listens. A man whose family is worth $20 million wrote this. It doesn't bring you a private jet or a supercar. It only gives you a comfortable life. Sometimes you go for Michelin cuisine. Sometimes you take business class when you travel. That's it. To afford a private jet and a yacht, you usually need at least 400 million. 400 million. For the 2 objects that this entire genre puts at 50. Hold that number. We'll get there, and when we do, you'll see he was being generous. The verb at 50 million is delegate, and delegation has a cost nobody prices. You walk into your kitchen on a Saturday, and the coffee is already made. You didn't make it. Somebody made it before you woke up. You're pleased, and in a small way you will never say out loud, you're unsettled, because making coffee was a piece of being alive, and you've just outsourced a piece of being alive, and the threshold for what counts as normal has moved without your permission, and it does not move back. Level 5. $100 million. Second correction, and this one is structural. Everybody puts the family office at the top of the ladder. 500 million, a billion, the level where you stop being a person and start being an institution. The actual widely cited threshold is $100 million. And some people in the industry put the break-even point, where running your own office becomes cheaper than paying someone else, closer to 47 million. So the family office does not arrive at the top. It arrives here. And it is not what the phrase makes you picture. A single family office managing 100 to 250 million typically runs on a core team of 2 to 4 people. A chief investment officer and a controller. Maybe a CEO and a CFO. For people in an office who work only on your money. Running it costs between $875,000 and $6.5 million a year. Personnel is 60 to 70% of that. That is the real texture of $100 million. Not a marble lobby. For people, a shared drive. And a quarterly meeting where somebody explains a tax structure to you and you nod. Now, at 4%, $100 million produces $4 million a year, sustainably, forever. $4 million a year. That is when the jet becomes genuinely reasonable, because $1 million of it goes to the aircraft, and you still have $3 million to live on. Here is what actually changes at $100 million, and it isn't the objects. It's the friction. You step out of the public economy. You don't shop in stores. Your assistant does, or the brand sends you things directly. You don't go to restaurants, or you go to the private room. You don't stand in lines. You don't wait. You have removed yourself, without ever deciding to, from the ordinary friction that every other human being on Earth experiences every day of their lives. And you forget that other people wait. You get reminded when you travel somewhere and see a crowd and think, oh, right, this is how most people live. And then the car door closes and the reminder fades. You have art on walls that cost more than most people's houses. You didn't buy it as an investment. You bought it because you liked it. You're aware that this is a statement. You pretend it isn't. And your social circle narrows. Not by choice. By geometry. The people you used to have dinner with can't afford your vacations. Inviting them would embarrass everyone. So you stop. And you fill the space with new friends who can afford it. And the friendships are pleasant and shallow in a way the old ones weren't. You see your old friends twice a year. Everyone says everyone's doing well. There are 556,000 people on this planet worth more than $30 million. 500,000 people, out of 8 billion, holding $63 trillion between them. You're in that group now, and the group has no meetings, and nobody sends you a card. The verb at 100 million is insulate. Level 6. $500 million. Now the yacht, since we're doing receipts. A super yacht over 70 meters costs more than $100 million to buy. But the buying isn't the expense. The keeping is. A 40-meter yacht, barely half that size, needs 8 to 10 crew, and that crew costs $500,000 to $600,000 a year. Insurance, $70,000 to $120,000. Routine maintenance, $100,000 to $500,000. And a premium Mediterranean berth in peak season runs over $10,000 a night, just to be tied to a dock. The rule of thumb in the industry is that a yacht costs about 10% of its purchase price every year, forever, whether you board it or not. So a $100 million boat is a $10 million a year habit, which requires $250 million of capital doing nothing else. Half your net worth, at level 6, to own one boat. That's the $400 million. That's where the man with $20 million got his number, and he was being generous, because he was only counting the yacht and the jet. He wasn't counting the house they have to sit next to. But here's what actually defines 500 million, and it has nothing to do with boats. You are no longer a person who has money. You are an institution that has staff. The family office that was 4 people at 100 million is now 5 to 12 people. There are lawyers whose entire practice is you. Accountants whose entire year is you. You have become, without ever intending it, the product around which a small industry has organized itself. You do not make financial decisions alone. You could, technically. You don't. Every decision above a threshold goes through a meeting. And every meeting has an agenda, and every agenda was prepared by somebody whose full-time job is preparing agendas for people like you. You've been on a magazine cover. Maybe twice. The first time was strange. The second time you noticed the photograph more than the article. Because the article said what your team had decided the article would say. You give money away now. Not a little. A lot. There's a foundation or a donor-advised fund, or both, and a person whose entire job is philanthropy. You are doing real, measurable good in the world. You are also meeting a great many people who want something from you. And you can no longer reliably tell which friends were friends before and which arrived after. You suspect most of them are somewhere in between. You let them be. And you are aware, completely aware, that you could stop. That nothing is forcing you forward. That the number could freeze exactly where it is, and you, your children, and your grandchildren would be fine for 100 years. You don't stop. The verb at 500 million is protect. You're not building anymore. You're fortifying. The game turned from offense to defense somewhere behind you, and nobody announced it. And defense will occupy the rest of your life. Level 7. $1 billion. There are 3,428 of them in the world. Together, they hold $20.1 trillion. 3,000 people. That's a small town. That's one high school's worth of humans, holding an amount of money that would be the 3rd largest economy on the planet if you gave it a flag. And here's the strangest fact in this entire video. The lifestyle does not change from 100 million to a billion. It doesn't. The plane is the same plane. The house is a better house, but it's the same kind of house. The staff is a larger version of a staff you already had. Everything physical about your existence plateaued at level 3, refined through level 5, and then simply stopped improving, because there is nothing above it to buy. There is no meal better than the best meal. There is no bed better than the best bed. What changes at a billion is not what you own. It's what happens when you speak. A sentence you say in a meeting moves a market. An email you forward gets a regulation rewritten. A company you put $4 million into 11 years ago is now the largest employer in a country you've never visited. You did not plan this. You cannot unplan it. Your name means something you did not decide it would mean. People who have never met you hold confident opinions about you, assembled from 3 data points, and one photograph taken at a bad angle in 2019. You cannot correct those opinions. Correcting them would require a press tour you will never do. You've read articles about yourself and not recognized the person in them. You stopped reading the articles. You did not stop being in them. $1 billion is a membership in a club that never meets. You've met 20 or 30 of the others, at dinners, on boards, at conferences in places with good security. You know some of them are better people than you, and some are considerably worse. And you know that from the outside, nobody can tell which is which, including, sometimes, you. You wake up on a Tuesday. Your assistant has already been through your inbox. Your schedule is already set. Your breakfast is already made. Your day is already something the world is expecting. You are being carried by the momentum of your own life. And the life runs whether you run it or not. The verb at $1 billion is exist in a way the world reacts to. The payoff. So let's put the whole thing together, with the receipts attached. 1 million, breathe. 40,000 a year. 5 times the middle of the country. 5 million, compare. 200,000 a year. Not the 1%. Top 4. 13.7 million. Choose. The actual 1%. 550,000 a year and the end of obligation. 50 million. Delegate. A staff you can afford and a jet you still can't. 100 million. Insulate. For people managing your money and the disappearance of waiting. 500 million. Protect. An institution with your name on it and a boat that eats a quarter of your capital. 1 billion. Exist. 3,428 people and a life that runs without you. Now look at that list again and find the moment your daily life stopped getting better. It's level 3. 13.7 million. Everything after that is logistics. Larger logistics, more expensive logistics, logistics with staff. But logistics. The freedom was purchased at level 3 and every dollar after it bought infrastructure to manage the dollars. And the verb you actually wanted, the one that made you start saving in the first place, the reason you were doing math on your phone at midnight, was breathe. Breathe shows up at level 1. One more thing, and I've thought about this one more than all the rest. A man who has been up this ladder twice and down it twice described it like this. He hit life-changing wealth. He lost it. He hit it again. He lost it again. He sat at $10 million, liquid, and reached for 30 and lost everything reaching. He has made $1 million in a single day. He has lost $1 million in a single day. He has driven a Ferrari through a Taco Bell drive-thru, digging for loose change to pay for lunch. And what he said at the end was this. They act like it's a straight line. For me, it's been a roller coaster. That's the last correction, and it's the biggest one. This is not a ladder. Nobody hands you a level and lets you keep it. People fall. People fall from 6 to 2 in 18 months, and the video never shows you that part, because the fall doesn't fit in a thumbnail. So the number isn't the point, and the level isn't the point either. Somewhere right now, someone is putting their first $1,000 into an index fund, and they think they're starting the climb. They don't know yet that the thing they're climbing toward shows up almost immediately, and everything above it is weight. If this changed the number in your head, subscribe. Every level, with the receipts, from here on. And if you're living at one of these levels right now, tell me what I got wrong. The best corrections I've ever gotten came from the comments, and they came from people who were actually there. I read all of them.